One of the toughest and most surprising things that I've ever done in my life was to build a business to over 6 figures in sales before I left my job. So this was back when my job at the time, a few years ago, was in digital advertising consulting. And I took those same job skills and turned that into an online consulting business. Or my job was in digital advertising and I turned it into a digital advertising consulting business. And it was not easy. It took a lot of work. And I'm going to share with you some of my top tips today for how I was able to do it. Because way too often, especially back then when I was doing this, I didn't see anyone talking about how they built their business while in their jobs. All I saw were people talking about, hey, I left my job, I burned the bridges or burned the boats, and this is how I was able to do it. And it felt so sexy, but also so risky. And I am a super risk-averse person. I wasn't going to leave my good job that I had been really lucky to get a certain position and salary without having a way to pay my bills afterwards. And I'm sure maybe you feel the same. So let me share with you a few things that really made a difference for me to be able to do this. The first thing was the specific business model that I chose to focus my business on. So I didn't create a physical product because I really wasn't interested in that, to be honest. I knew it would probably take longer to create, have lower profit margins, and a few other considerations as well. I didn't create software for essentially the same reason. Also, I didn't know what software I could even create. I just knew, hey, I had my skills, my job skills, my experience, and there had to be a way to monetize it. And that's when I did a lot of research. And this was, again, remember, this was a few years ago when coaching, consulting wasn't as common or established. And I realized it was a huge aha for me to find that, oh, you can do coaching or consulting. And so what I did, I experimented with a few different things that I could do. Microsoft Excel consulting, career coaching, got some clients, but those really just weren't very interesting to me. And that's when I realized, okay, I could take my job skills in digital advertising, which I do think is really fun, and do consulting on that. And this was right when Facebook ads were really new, had just come out. So I was in a really great position to monetize that knowledge because everyone wanted to know, how can I use Facebook ads to grow my business? And so that's what I did. And what I did, back to the business model, was that I didn't charge by the hour. I didn't try and sell a very small course because I did the math. I had a 6-figure salary, so let's just use $100,000 as the number. If I wanted to sell, let's say, a $100 course, I would have to make so many sales. 100,000 divided by $100, 1,000 courses to make that. And when I was just starting out, I had no audience. I was starting literally from scratch. And so I thought, okay, how would I do this? How would I make 1,000 sales? I couldn't fathom that number of sales at the time. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to sell that. I'm not going to sell by the hour because that's essentially the same thing. Maybe I charge, let's say, $250 an hour. It's about the same thing. I would have to make maybe 500 sales to make $100,000. That's just, again, way too many. How am I going to go out there and make that many sales when I have 0 people in my audience? And so remember, this was back when coaching wasn't as established. I was doing research and I saw, oh, you can do a coaching or consulting business where you charge by the package. And if I do that, let's say I charge $5,000 for a package. Okay, if I make 20 sales, that's how I'm going to get to $100,000. And so I thought, okay, bingo. Once I found that, this was the business model for me. So again, notice, I'm not charging by the hour. I'm not charging a small course. Like, there's so much information online about a course being the holy grail because it's passive income. Sure, once you get to that point, it's great leveraged income. It's not totally passive because you still have to provide customer support and things like that and support your customers. But It's definitely a lot more leverage than one-on-one coaching. However, depending on your goals, there's a right business model for your goal. And my goal at the time was, what is the most doable way I can create to build a business and a business model that allows me to replace my income or come close to it before I leave my job. It wasn't going to be selling 500 or 1,000 hours of my time or courses. And I said, okay, it's going to be through trying to get as many one-on-one clients as possible around that $5,000 range. I didn't initially start there. I wasn't able, even though that was equivalent to what I was making in my job, I just had no audience. I had no testimonials, no credibility online. So I started at a slightly lower price and quickly worked my way up to that. So having the right business model was key, because that actually leads into tip number 2 that I have. Because I had the right business model where I just needed a handful of really great clients at a higher price, I didn't have to set up a fancy funnel. I didn't have to set up a fancy website, all of that. I just had to go out there and find about 20 people, build great relationships with them, and turn those relationships into paying clients. And that's what I did. Which is tip number 2. All I focused on was finding my clients online through online Facebook groups, social media, just wherever I could. Going out there, finding them, answering their questions, sharing content that I knew my ideal clients would be interested in. And then whenever someone said, hey, thank you, I would say, okay, great, I'm glad you found it helpful. And they would see me show up consistently every single day, whether it was in a Facebook group, on whatever social media platform, or a forum, wherever. And eventually those people would say, hey, I've been seeing you. You obviously know what you're talking about. I'd love to talk about how I can get more support from you, or I have some questions for you. And eventually all roads lead to Rome, right? All roads led to, I've given a lot of value. And if it feels right for us to talk about working together so you can get even more, so that you can get my mind, my experience specifically customized for your business, okay, great, let's talk about it. And so that was tip number 2 that allowed me to really build my business while I was in a really demanding 9-to-5 job. At the time, we were a startup, so you know what startup hours are like, or you can imagine. And so it wasn't like I had a very easy job either. And so, but doing that allowed me. So for example, during the week, if I had a really busy day, but I could take out 30 minutes just to be consistent with sharing my content, to see what responses people had shared to my previous posts, to see what emails had come in, that's all I did. I wasn't spending hours at a time trying to make this really perfect funnel or trying to set up a really gorgeous website, which if you've been working on that, you know takes so much time. And so that's all I focused on, which allowed me to, many days I only had 30 minutes a day. Especially during the week. I did work more on the weekends, but during the week, if I had 30 minutes, that's all I did. And that's what I needed to do. That's all I needed to do at that point to move my business forward and to be connecting with my audience. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is that I really stacked up my activities so that as the longer I went doing this, the more results, the more momentum I built. So this is what I mean. When you're starting out, you might be thinking, and I thought this as well, my gosh, what if I immediately get way too many clients and I can't handle both them and my job? I thought that too. If only. Right? If only that was a problem that we had to deal with. Instead, most new entrepreneurs, new coaches, consultants have to deal with issues of basically not getting enough clients, not even getting one when you're starting out. And so I said, all right, you know what? I'm just going to, every time I think that, I'm just going to remind myself to be super focused and think on just this next client that I'm going to get. And so that kept me super focused on one client at a time. Okay? That was the first important thing. So I wasn't self-sabotaging by thinking, okay, what if I get too many clients, and then getting in my head and then stopping the consistency and the showing up in the content that I was sharing. So I did that. Then here's what happened. I started out and got my first handful of clients that way. I would say maybe somewhere between 5 and 10. I don't remember the exact number. And again, it was a lot of work. I'm not saying it was easy. It was a lot of work. However, what that allowed me to do was I did it on the weekends, worked with clients, all of that. And then here's where I started snowballing. After I got those first few clients' results, I shared their testimonials. Right? So right away, I was able to share, okay, hey, this person has gotten this amazing result working with me. You can tell I know what I'm talking about. And that really started building more and more credibility for me. It was layered on top of the consistent content and engagement that I had done that I just shared with you. So people had already seen me. They weren't like, who's this person out of nowhere sharing a testimonial? They had seen my content. Now they were seeing my testimonials. And so some people who had been on the sidelines initially said, hey, now that I'm seeing your testimonials, I'm ready to come and start working with you. So that was kind of like the first snowball effect. The next snowball effect was, and this really applies to pretty much any coaching or consulting offer that you can think of. My first few packages were about 3 months long. At the end of those 3 months, a good number of my clients said, hey, I've loved working with you. I've loved getting these results. And I actually, no, they didn't say that. I had to initiate the conversation. So let me rephrase. We talked through it. We had this conversation. So yeah, I said, hey, have you loved the results you've gotten? And they said yes, and so on and so forth. And I shared, hey, well, this is what we've accomplished in 3 months. We set out to do this and we did. Now, I know you have other goals that you wanted to accomplish in terms of your advertising and growing your business. So I'd love to work with you for another 3 months so we can hit these goals as well. So what happened was, once I built that proof, I'd shown that client how I could help them. And then I said, hey, you've loved these results. You've obviously gotten a great return on your investment. Here's how we can continue to work together for longer. And what that did was essentially basically brought in another client sale through that renewal, where it was a lot easier for me to get that sale because that was already a client I'd worked with. And so I don't remember the exact percentage, but I believe about 30% of my clients ended up renewing at the time. Also, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I wasn't as good at it. I also had my own money issues where I had to work through. Even though I was helping my clients get amazing results, I kind of felt guilty about continuing to sell them. And so because of that, 30% was a decent, respectable rate. And that's a baseline benchmark for what you could be aiming for as you start out as well. And again, this applies to pretty much any industry that you can think of. I've worked with students at this point in over, 20, 30 industries, and this is applied to all of them. So it's the same process. If you've helped someone get great results, great. How can you work with them further to get even more, bigger, better results? Okay. So that was snowball effect number 2, where some clients were continuing to work with me. So as you can imagine, now each time I get a new client, that's great. But then I have all these existing clients who are continuing to renew. So that just brings me more and more sales in, while making it easier to make sales than it was for me when I first started out, right? And so the final piece is, as all this was building up, my clients were loving their results, I was getting momentum with my content, then I started building my own community. So at the time, I started a Facebook group. And said, hey, if you've been loving my content, I'm gonna move it into my own Facebook community. And this applies no matter what platform you're using. You could be using Instagram, for example, or just really guest posting, or really anything. It's the same process. You start by connecting with people where they are, and then you move them back to your community. And so I did that. And what that did was, because I built my own community, I engaged with people, that helped them start seeing me as a leader. It helped them start seeing me more and more as someone they would want to hire. And then they would share my community. So more and more people would come. And that created that final snowball effect that allowed me to just really get clients faster and faster. And I really want to emphasize this. It was not easy. It wasn't like I immediately took off. There was a period when I first started out where I had over 30 rejections in a row. People saying, I don't know you. Maybe you are good at what you do in your job, but I don't see any proof of that online. Or you're too expensive, even though I was charging exactly my salary in my job. Or things like, look, you look really young, right? And a blessing and a curse. And so just all the reasons you can think of. So I had to go through that. But that's also a plus, because after every rejection, I learned, okay, so this is what their objection was. This is how I can address it better through my content in the future. Also, what it allowed me to do is to not get overwhelmed. Because they wouldn't have. But let's just say all 30 of those no's in a row were actually yeses. I would have been instantly overwhelmed. I would have probably self-sabotaged, said I can't do this, right? And given up. So you can choose to see the silver lining behind every situation. There always is one. And so what that did is it allowed my growth not to be linear, right? I wasn't like, oh, okay, straight from the beginning. It was flat, rejection. And then it was like a curved growth graph. And what that allowed me to do is really learn. And so I got one client. Okay, I can handle one client. I got another client a little bit later. I can handle 2 and 3 and so on. And so by the time I got a good influx of clients, like the last month before I left my job, I believe I made over $50,000 in sales. At that point, I was able to handle them because I had my processes down. I knew exactly how to work with a client to get them the best results, and I was able to do it super efficiently. And so that's how I was able to build my business, make over 6 figures in sales before I left my job. And it really set me up so that after I left my job, I still had income coming in. A lot of those clients continued to renew. And so it set me up in a really great way so that, yes, it was a lot of work while I was managing both, but I only had to do it for a short amount of time. I was super focused. There were times when it was overwhelming, but it wasn't so overwhelming because I was trying to do too many things that I didn't need to be doing. And by the time I left my job, I had built my community. I had more clients interested. I had income coming in. And so it was a completely different situation from what you hear most of the time, where people leave their jobs and they are stressed out about paying the bills or wondering if they need to go back to a job eventually, and all of those things that we want to make sure that you avoid as well. So those are some of my best tips for how I was able to build my business while working a really demanding job, and to do it in a way that replaced my income before I even left my job. Hopefully you found that really helpful. And if so, I do have another really great video for you. The flip side of this video is the mistakes that I made in my business when I was first starting out, and that since then I've seen so many of my students make as well. And so make sure you check that too, so that you can avoid the top 3 mistakes that I made, that most new entrepreneurs make when they're building their businesses, that can ultimately cost you thousands of dollars in potential client sales, or just wasted money and so much time, months or years of wasted time on building your business. So make sure you check out that video. I also have a great PDF for you on my roadmap to building a successful, profitable, anywhere from a few $1,000s to 6 figures business while working your 9-to-5, the roadmap that I personally used. So I highly recommend that you check that out, and you can get it really easily. There is a URL somewhere with this video, either above or in the description below. You can just sign up to get that PDF right away. So make sure you check out my next video on the 3 mistakes to avoid and get that 9-to-5 escape velocity plan PDF. Other than that, if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you're notified every week when I release a new awesome video just like this one on building your own online coaching, consulting, and/or course business. Thanks so much for watching and for being here, and I will see you next time.